Roundabouts and Firewood, a mental health approach for Irish guys. Chapter 4, Complexity Malfunction. On average, people get their cars serviced once a year. If something breaks down in the interim period, particularly with an older model, it's no surprise. A car is a machine with a number of parts that can malfunction. Sooner or later, if you drive it enough, it's going to break down. In terms of complexity, a car is quite simple when compared to the human brain. After all, the human brain is the most complex thing in the known universe. It goes to follow that the rational question should not be why did something go wrong with it, but rather why didn't something go wrong sooner? Some of us, due to genetics, are more predisposed than others to mental problems. Still, the constant uploading of thoughts, emotions, experiences, and the general noise of everyday life and all of its demands make anyone fair game for the two big disorders, anxiety and depression. And yet, somehow it became part of Irish culture to not only ignore the mental health problems, but also to stigmatize them. In other words, it's acceptable for something as simple as your car to break down, but when your mind goes on the fritz, that's something to push under the carpet. A few months into living in Tralee, I joined an OCD group, and my fellow members confirmed that they struggled with the secrecy. Many remarked on how they had to overcome the stigma to join the group, and after finding the courage to do so, they couldn't mention it to close family members because the family members subscribed to the idea that a mental health problem was something to be embarrassed about. In the group meetings, there was one issue I consistently brought up, and each time I was given the same response. As the only male in the group, apparently there had been another one the previous year, I asked for an explanation for the dearth of fellas. The explanation, because Irish guys don't go to mental health support groups. I tried to dig deeper, knowing full well that guys tend not to go to doctors, but some do. Yet, I was the only male attending these meetings. Certainly, some other lad out there must want to do something, must want to know there are others. I was certain if I went to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, I told my group, that there would be guys. That's because drinking excessively is okay, one of the members explained. Anxiety is not okay for men. It's only okay for women, as long as we don't tell anyone. It was clear that Kian wasn't going to grow up in an environment where a mental problem was equivalent to a physical problem. What I learned from my OCD group was that, on a whole, Ireland was like the States in the late 70s. We all knew men were having problems, but the guys and the rest of society pretended the issue didn't exist or wasn't worth addressing all that seriously. I was determined to make sure that Kian would grow up knowing that things going wrong in your head is perfectly normal, even expected. The first thing I needed to do was to find the right time and place to explain my mental health issues to my son. Fortunately, in Ireland, there's always a roundabout nearby. Chapter 5, Clashlehane. Because he is an only child who always got overloaded with gifts, I opted to wait a couple of weeks after his 4th birthday to take Kian to Smith's to spend some of the money his American grandparents had sent him. With the back seat filled with a selection of Power Ranger toys, I strapped him in his chair. We had recently moved into a house that was in an estate just off the Aberdorney Road, and, barring any traffic, the drive to our new home should not have taken more than 10 minutes. I pulled out of the parking lot of the Manor West shopping mall. As I took a left at the Clashlehane roundabout, now known as the roundabout with the statue of 4 Kerry footballers, a little itch of anxiety took hold. And 100 meters down the road, as I was passing McDonald's, that itch became irritating enough for me to ask the question I have asked myself thousands of times. Did I just hit someone? I replayed the previous minute in my head. I didn't recall seeing a pedestrian on the road in front of the car, and if I hadn't seen anyone, the odds were low that I had struck someone down. But for anyone who has ever watched a courtroom drama, you know that eyewitness accounts are not always reliable. I couldn't rely on my visual memory, so the only way to prove I had not been involved in a hit-and-run accident was to return to the scene of the fictional crime. In America, that would have entailed going around the block. In Ireland, you simply have to do a 180-degree turn at the next roundabout. As luck would have it, there was one right ahead of me, the roundabout that you can take to go to the Kerry County Council. I gave in to my obsessive thoughts and made the U-turn. A minute later, I was back at the Clashlehane roundabout, and everything checked out. Cars were driving on the road, and, most importantly, there was no one sprawled out lying in the path of traffic. For the briefest of moments, I was relieved until it occurred to me that if you are looking around searching for evidence, you've likely taken your eyes off the road directly in front of you, and in doing so, you might have hit someone while committing this mistake. To confirm the safety of the people in Kerry, I made another U-turn, and the pattern was now set. As soon as I confirmed, once again, that there was no one on the road when I returned to the Clashlehane roundabout, new thoughts would emerge by the time I made it back to the County Council roundabout. I was trapped in a mental prison. Initially, Cian didn't take any notice that we kept returning to the place we had just been. His focus was on the toys. But after the fourth or fifth time we passed McDonald's, it struck my son that we didn't seem to be making any progress towards getting home. This led to the inevitable question, "Dad, why do you keep turning around?" The timing was terrible. I was certain I only needed to check just one last time, but then my son disrupted my concentration. "Cian, I can't talk right now." "Why aren't we going home? Let's go home." I ignored him. I had bigger problems than worrying about whether my child was enjoying the car ride. I needed to save a life, the life of the person who I had hit but couldn't find. Cian got angry. "I want to go home. Dad, I want to go home," he yelled. I continued to ignore him. I needed to focus on the road and nothing else. If I could just confirm my innocence, we would go home. But each time I circled around, the anxiety got worse and Cian's protests got louder and angrier. When he began screaming, I knew I had to stop the car. The only way to do that was to go forward. I shot through the county council roundabout, then another one, until I pulled into the Dunn's parking lot. Tired, scared, and frustrated, the moment had finally arrived. It was time to explain a few things. Chapter 6. The Conversation. All right, here's the deal. The reason I kept driving around and around is that I'm crazy. Your dad is crazy. Cian laughed. His laughing made me laugh, and this proved to be soothing enough to calm me down a bit. "You're crazy, Dad?" "Yeah, well, technically I have what's called OCD. OCD? Yep, you should get used to those 3 letters because you're going to be hearing them a lot. You see, sometimes I start thinking I might have hit someone when I'm driving around even when I didn't, but I think I did, so I keep going back and checking to see if I did." Cian's laughter continued. "You didn't hit anyone." "Look, it doesn't make sense. I make it up in my head. That's me being crazy. That's what OCD is about, making stuff up in your head that isn't true." "You didn't hit anybody, Dad," Cian said. "I know I didn't, but something in my brain tells me I could have." Once the conversation started, I realized that I had never considered that Cian would listen and try to understand from his point of view. At 4 years old, he didn't have preconceived notions about mental problems. It was only when I was introducing the topic that he had any notions of them at all. With him, not even in primary school, there was no stigma attached to the idea of mental illness. Yes, he understood, or at least had heard of the term crazy, and judging from his response, crazy was something he found amusing. My particular craziness was new to him, and he, with his sense of humor, was taking it in and making sense of it in his way. OCD was just another new topic in his short life, and his introduction to it just happened to be the result of my inability to free myself from the two roundabouts for 10 minutes. He had gotten frustrated, but now that he understood it had to do with this outside force called OCD, he was laughing and enjoying the moment. Enjoying, one might say, how crazy it was to think you've struck down a pedestrian when it was clear to Kian, who hadn't even been paying attention most of the drive, that I had not made contact with anyone or anything. Kian began to ask questions, trying his best to understand what I was saying, and after I furnished an answer, he would either laugh, ask more questions, or both. I explained that some people get colds or the flu. Some people have problems breathing around animals such as cats or dogs. Some people can't eat too much sugar. Your dad, I explained, gets scared of imaginary things, things that aren't true. I just make things up in my head. Then I get worried. Worried about what? Well, when I was going around in circles, I kept thinking I might have hit someone with the car. Then I thought the guard would arrive and take me to jail. Then I wouldn't get to see you again. That kind of stuff. Kian found this more amusing than anything else I had said. When he quit laughing, my son said, "You didn't hit anyone. You'd feel it if you did." "Of course I didn't hit anyone." Kian paused and let the dust settle for a moment until he asked, "Will I be crazy when I get older?" Well, I can't say for sure. This I do know. My dad has some issues. Clearly I have things going wrong in my head, so you might have to deal with some problems. Then again, maybe it won't. You could turn out to be even-keeled like your mother instead of up and down like your manic father. Who knows? But if you ever have a problem, don't wait to go see a therapist. What's a therapist? That's who you go see when your brain acts funny.